If you are wanting a beautiful travel abroad destination that provides encounters with many different cultures and therefore increases your appreciation for other cultures and gives you insight to how other countries lives, but are afraid of going somewhere too far or too different than the culture you're used to, like they have different language or food, or afraid of what the people are going to be like, I believe the 2009 trip to Canada would be the right study abroad trip for you. Personally, I have traveled to Canada 7 different times. This would be visiting many different of the provinces and different cities, and experiencing really the culture and environment that you'd find there. And because of this, I've seen the beauty of the country and been able to, and lucky enough, to interact with many of its people. If you do choose to visit this wonderful place, there are some things that I believe you should know about before visiting. It is necessary to be familiar with the laws and processes of crossing the border. Once you begin your new adventure, you need to familiarize yourself with the culture and ideals of Canada, as well as understand the laws of the country and how it is partitioned into provinces instead of states like you may be used to here in the United States, and what to expect from the landscape and the weather while you're there, so you can be better prepared. Before a new trip to any destination begins, you must be accustomed to what you'll need in order to gain access to the desired country. So this is very important, and just as any other country, Canada has a border that will either allow or not allow you to cross, and there's really some things you need to know and things you need to have in order to be able to do this. First, you will need a valid identification, so this could be either a driver's license or a visa, which can be obtained from your local post office. Canada also has a different currency from the United States, so make sure that you know where to exchange it once you reach Canada. Most places generally do accept the US dollar, but it's always best to be prepared with some of your money partitioned into the Canadian currency, just as an emergency fund. You should also know where you'll be traveling. I've got a map, like I mentioned before. It's partitioned into provinces instead of states. Here they are. They get kind of smaller over on the East Coast, but generally they're pretty big, about the same size as states would be here. I have primarily been about right here in Ontario, and I have also driven into Manitoba. As you need to change the currency when you cross the border, you will also cross into a land with a very different culture and ideals that may be different than your own. I believe this is the most enticing part of this unique country, as the United States is known as the country of immigrants, and specifically where I'm from, in southwest Missouri, we're known as the melting pot. Canada is also considered the same, and rightfully so. This has given Canada a unique and broad culture, and this really changes the basic foundations because Canada's culture is influenced by most of the foreign countries. According to Santa Louis 2011, this is due to the British and French colonizing it when the country was first being started. So this mixed with the Native American culture and other cultures that after that came in, and they've kind of mixed together and created their own culture, unique cultures themselves. However, like I mentioned, there are the Native Americans that lived there before the French and British. I generally saw the most influence from them, both talking to them, and when you're driving along the roads, you'll see these paintings and the spiritualistic rock stacking along the roadways. Today, Canada is seen as a place that is very progressive and multicultural, described by the author of Culture Class, Ann Cotter. This would be best compared to the traditional liberal view of the U.S. That's mainly found in larger cities and places like universities. But when you with the change, you'll experience a culture. You'll also find change in the environment you're in. I believe Canada is probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to, and I've been lucky enough to experience it many different times. And although that is very enticing, it is best to understand the landscape and the weather of where you're visiting to better prepare yourself. The cities are much like what you'd expect in the United States, but the wilderness can be much different than what you might be used to, as well as the wildlife you might run into. And with that goes the rules of how you really shouldn't go into the forest alone, honestly, because there are bears and they are concerned there. Um, and this is due because once you're outside of the cities and the towns, it's primarily evergreen forest. But the main difference of Canada and its landscape is that they've got an estimated 2 million lakes, according to Feral Boys 2015. And I've got a picture of one of the lakes that I was on. This is called Trout Lake. This is where I went fishing. This would be at sunset, taken on the boat. And this would be one of the pictures I took midday. And as you can see, it really is just a beautiful place, and I love it. There's nothing more relaxing than being there on the lake when the weather's calm. Speaking of the weather, it is also pretty different than what you might be used to here in the United States. With this map, obviously as you go farther north to the pole, the weather gets colder. This shows the average temperature during what's mainly would be considered the summer temp. Around here, kind of closer to the United States, it really does stay about 70 degrees during the summer, which I think is my favorite temperature to be in. I've even like swam in the lakes while it was warm because they heat up so well because they are farther north and therefore technically closer to the sun. So now that we've discussed what what you need to be prepared when traveling to Canada and what to expect from the culture and its people, not to mention we looked at the typical environment and weather of Canada that you might experience while you're there. With that, it is understandable to be nervous when traveling to any destination that is new to you, but now we have discussed some important things that you should know before your trip, and because of that, I most definitely think you'll enjoy your experience in a great country like Canada while you're studying abroad. Thank you.